members here in the chambers, and we're waiting for Kathy. I believe she was joining online, so we'll look for her to come shortly. Minutes of the January 25th, 2021 meeting. I entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Motion by Barr.
I'll second.
Second by Harris. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that motion passes. Discussion and possible action on an amendment to the City of Wausau PFC manual relating to Articles 6.0 and 8.0. Tony, do you just want to update this real quickly on what you did? Just highlight that.
Sure. If you guys remember, we discussed at the last meeting, and we gave provisional authority to the fire chief to choose which selection steps are included in the manual. Basically, we gave the chief's discretion during the hiring process. This current hiring process, because of COVID mostly, we have eliminated the written exam for the safety of the applicants and the police staff. This language gives that discretion ability to continue for both the fire and police chief. The pre-employment process doesn't change, so like medical, psych, those things are outside the purview of the chief's authority to change. But the testing process, who we choose and how we choose them, the chiefs have the ability to make some changes without having to bring it to you for permission.
Bill, can you hit your mic so they can hear online?
In essence, they can administer the test or choose not to, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to approve those amendments.
So moved.
Moved by Kraft. Seconded by Barr. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. That motion passes. Policing Task Force update. Mayor Rosenberg. Give us a quick update on the task force.
Sure. It's been all task force all the time for me the last 2 weeks probably. We're using whips to kind of engage the community. We've been holding, I think we've had 5, 6 listening sessions. I think 5 listening sessions so far, 2 in person, the rest on Zoom. Several were kind of lightly attended, but it added to more people filling out the questionnaire, which is great. People are answering questions about it. We had our Hmong language listening session on Saturday, and that was it was good. We had several clan leaders there, which was great, and they actually invited me and the chief to a couple of other options, like discussions that they would like to talk about, maybe more in a private area. So it's bringing out some good things, and I think we'll end up in a really good place when we get more targeted with those focus groups and the questionnaires. You know, people had some really good questions that there are probably obvious answers to, but we maybe need to communicate those a little bit more, or, you know, I just don't even know what that is. So lots of listening, really good stuff. So
Great. And those sessions are being recorded?
they are, yes. Okay. I know they're being recorded specifically so that the task force members can watch them. I know at least 1 or 2 of them will be on the YouTube channel. They might all be there. I'm not sure. I'll have to check with Whips on that. If you wanted access to them, of course, you'd have access. I mean, they're all public records, so there's no reason you wouldn't be able to see them.
Great. That's how I'll be watching all of them. But
Yeah.
for anybody else on the PFC, it'd be interesting to watch.
Sometimes it's difficult to get to those, you know, you're looking for the sites, and it's our site being Wausau, and it's not there, and then you have to go, maybe you'll find it on YouTube. YouTube works, but it's scattered all over the place.
I'll make sure that we have a link, an email maybe out to all of you so that you can easily click on it and
Thank you.
check it out. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Next, update on the fire chief recruitment. Tony, you want to just give us a quick update?
Sure. We've got 18 applicants so far, and let me see. Actually, when does the posting close? I think we've got about another week or 2 left on the recruitment, so that's really exciting. The city is going to go through and we'll do an initial screen of all the applicants against the minimum qualifications. So anyone who doesn't meet the minimums, doesn't have enough education years of service as required, will receive a letter from us letting them know they're eliminated. And then I've been in discussions with the mayor about putting together a strong competitive process for how we can winnow the list down to you guys. You wanted us to get it down to about 3 to 5 applicants that actually come to you. So we're probably going to do a combination. It usually depends on how many people pass that initial screening, then you tailor your approach from there. But we'll likely do a combination of resume screening, so we kind of score the resumes based on how qualified the person is, as well as some remote interviews, maybe with some interactive processes. So we're really looking forward to getting you guys some qualified candidates to look at.
Great. Any questions from the commission?
When do we plan on hiring, what's our target date?
The PFC interviews, I want to say we had put aside a couple of weeks in March. Was it the second and third weeks that we were looking at, Michael? Do you remember?
I can't remember. Maybe the third week. That would be probably better.
Yeah. So what you're likely going to get is from me an email to set aside some time for listening sessions.
Okay.
That we've talked about for the current employees. That would be 3 days in a row so that we could hit all shifts. And when I spoke to the chief, she thought during the normal workday would probably be best. And then after that, we would be looking at, the city is it's gonna take the city a couple weeks to kind of make sure that we're sending the right people on to you. But we can go ahead and try to block off some time for those interviews at the same time as we schedule the listening sessions.
Okay.
That's good.
Good. Thank you.
Bill and Cheryl, you both have participated in those listening sessions in the past. Is
Yes.
there any element that you really would hope to see that you want to give staff any direction on?
Basically, we wanted to know, first of all, it was a different situation. You know, we needed major changes. And so, you know, we were really wondering about what kind of leadership, et cetera. But I think the bottom line is, I want to find out are we going in the right direction? Is it going as well as, actually, I think it is, but we're going to find that out. And then, of course, my big thing is internally, do we really need to go outside? Do we have a problem or not a problem? So, you know, and it's very informal. It's interesting, you'll start off and they'll be very quiet and very, you know, reserved, and then it starts to open up, and it's not a complaint session, it's a very good session, so, sure.
I think, excuse me, I think we did have a list of questions that were sent out to each of the people first, and then they filled it out, and then we were able to see that, and then from there, we asked the questions.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so, I don't know if you,
One of the items that you'll get along with the, you know, kind of prospective dates to schedule is going to be a survey to review. The difficulty that we had with the last survey was that they were all open-ended questions. So tabulating the results was almost impossible because everybody said something different. So you had to report out for each and every person who responded to the survey for each question. So I'm looking at updating that so that maybe there's more categories to choose so that it will be easier to report out the findings.
Yeah.
But you'll have a chance to look those over as well before we schedule the listening sessions.
Okay.
great, thank you.
Any other comments or feedback from other commissioners relative to the recruitment process, the listening sessions, and the survey that we'll get a draft of here in an email this week? Okay. So we'll all provide feedback to you, and then we'll get that finalized and be rocking and rolling, and hopefully put ourselves in a position to potentially have a pick by the end of March. That would be great.
Good, that would be good, that's good.
And the recruitment ends the 5th of March.
Great. Moving along. Excellent. All right, monthly presentation of police department operations. Chief Bliven.
Good morning.
Morning.
I wanted to give one more update on the policing task force, and that is that the listening sessions and the public input is taking place during February. And so WIPS, in talking with Eric Giordano, said that his intention is to be able to provide an update on the information gathered during the listening sessions and other mediums of public input on March 15th at the March 15th meeting date. So I just want to give you guys information on that, so you have, you can look for some information on that. I just wanted to give an update on recruitment. Our target is to do interviews for new officers with the Police and Fire Commission in April at the meeting date. We currently have 7 candidates remaining in our pool, and we're doing 7 background investigations right now. We should be doing interviews again next month, probably the 3rd week or so of March, and then onto the polygraph and conditional offers. So hopefully by April, we'll be able to get 3 candidates to you folks for interviews. I wanted to give an update on the massage therapy ordinance. Just as background, in case you don't remember, we were having issues in our community with some establishments that we believe that were unlicensed and were providing sexual favors for individuals that went to these massage therapy establishments. And so that expanded into a bigger problem in our community with legitimate massage therapy places getting phone calls and being asked at in-person sessions for similar sexual favors. And so they were making complaints to the police department asking us to resolve the issue. So we adopted an ordinance, the Public Health and Safety Committee, and then our city council passed an ordinance that basically just allowed us to enforce licensing for massage therapies through our city municipal code. And so there is a state agency that does do that licensing, but there isn't a lot of state enforcement. So the city council adopted a policy or a municipal ordinance that allows us to do that enforcement. So we went into, we've communicated with all of the massage therapy establishments around town by letter and indicated that we were adopting this ordinance, that we would be doing checks to make sure that all of the individuals doing massage therapy in our community were licensed properly through the state. And then we did that. So in early February, our community resource unit went through and went to all 37 active businesses that are doing massage therapy in our community. And they did identify 2 establishments that did not have licensed massage therapists. And we issued citations both to the establishments and to the massage therapists that were doing that work without licensing. And so like I said, we went into 37 establishments, 35 of them were properly licensed, and all 35 were very appreciative of the work that officers were doing, so that they hopefully in the future will stop getting calls and being solicited for sex. So I just wanted to give you an update on where that's at. We will be doing additional follow-up with the establishments where there were violations.
Are those out of business then?
They're still in business right now. I mean, our municipal ordinance just allows us to give citations, and we plan to follow up additionally with those establishments here in the future. And my hope is that they will move out of our community. The ordinance we adopted is we modeled after West Allis, who had similar issues, and they were able to resolve the lion's share of their issues there. They still have some issues that pop up here and there, but the ordinance really gives us some focus to be able to go into a business and talk to people and find out what's going on, who's working there, are they licensed, which we didn't have that authority prior to that ordinance. So hopefully we will make progress and there won't be any more of those establishments in town.
Does the state do anything? I mean, they're the ones that do the licensing, aren't they?
Yeah, right. We've sent our reports down to the state, but the establishments that we have, we cited because they were
Fly by night.
they didn't have the proper licensing. So there's not a ton that the state's going to do on that, I don't believe, but we are working with the state. Just an update quickly on the union contract. The union, we did get an email last week that the union did ratify the contract that we negotiated, so it should be good to go. And we have a union contract that goes through the end of 2022. It was a 2-year contract. Most of the work that we did was language cleanup and then and pay and benefits. So that's largely what we negotiated with. Just for information, the union negotiated a raise each year, which will be 2% in January and 1% mid-year, so a 3% overall hike for the union each of the next 2 years. And then there was some other smaller things that we worked on with them. We did do some step compression so that officers are able to get to the top step of pay sooner, which is good because when we compare ourselves to other local municipalities and our comparables, it makes us more competitive in that way. And then in terms of lateral entry, we already had lateral entry where if an officer with 5 years of experience from another agency applied to us and we hired them, that they get that 5 years of experience in our pay scale. So they come in at a higher rate of pay. So we also, in this most recent negotiation with the lateral entry, authorized the same thing for vacation schedules. So somebody with 5 years of vacation or 5 years of experience in another agency can come in and move into our vacation accrual rate at 5 years of experience. And that just makes us a little more competitive and hopefully can draw in some more lateral entry candidates. And then the last thing on my operations report is our 2021 awards banquet. As you know, every year we typically do an awards banquet about this time of year. Usually it's the first week of March, last week of February. Because of COVID, we have opted not to do that this year, but we did still request for nominations for a lot of our awards, and we'll be doing that through social media and through video efforts over the next few months. Probably won't start until April or so because we have some other work that's being done with our videographer right now. So we still are going to be acknowledging our staff in terms of awards for 2020 work, but that won't be in a regular banquet. That'll be through social media. And that's my report.
Any questions for the chief? We will all miss your bow tie.
Maybe I'll have to wear it in one of the videos.
There you go.
That's a good point. Thanks for the reminder.
All right. Next, we have the monthly presentation of the fire department operations. Chief Kajawa.
Morning.
All right, Chief.
So you have our activity report. What I would like to add to that, although it's not on this particular report, is if you didn't hear about the fire we had on Kickbush Street, and that was actually Mayor Kickbush's actually house. He actually built it here, so it was very, very old, one of the oldest houses in the city. Unfortunately, the fire got into the walls, and it was actually balloon frame construction, which doesn't have, back then, they didn't have fire stops in the walls, so got in the walls, ended up in the attic space, and so we're not sure if they're going to be able to actually save that house. It's still up for question. One of the things that I also wanted to mention about that is that our Wausau Fire Department Firefighter Foundation actually partnered with that family that's currently in that house, and they're going to help them to find a renting place because they have several animals, and so I thought that was kind of a cool thing that our foundation is partnering with that family and offering them rent, paying their rent for a few months until they can get back on their feet or figure out what's going to happen to their house. Beautiful house. I'm sure you probably know where it is, but beautiful house. It's unfortunate that it might be lost. Even the historic presence of it in the community might be lost. So, Tracy, how many firemen were on the scene?
There was, our whole department was there, plus we called in local resources. So actually, Riverside was there. Riverside I think we had maybe 4 EMS calls during that time, 4 or 5 EMS calls during that time we were fighting the fire. So Riverside took many of those. Safer was actually there. So we had several area departments come in. I'm not sure, Town of Wausau, I think, might have been there. I don't have the specifics of who was actually responded in, but we did pull a box alarm, so everybody that was on that box actually responded. I think the biggest thing that we have when we have a fire like that is the EMS runs don't stop. We still have to supply, and sometimes they can cut an ambulance loose depending on where they are in the firefight. So they'll be able to do that. But when you have 4 or 5 EMS calls in the time frame of you're trying to fight a fire and you're rotating people, and as you might recall, this was a couple weeks ago, bitterly cold, really, really cold temperatures, so difficult to fight a fire. Obviously, water and freezing cold temperatures don't go well together. So very difficult fire to fight. The guys did a great job chasing it, and that's what we call it. We chase the fire because it's up through the walls into the attic space, and it's lath and plaster, very difficult to pull, and so they need to work hard, and so they're rotating a lot, getting wet, standing out in the freezing cold. So it's that type of weather is not conducive for fighting fire, but they actually did a great job. It came in the early morning hours, and we ended up being there probably until about noon or 1 that morning or that day.
Where is that located, Chief?
On Kickbush, right as you're going up the street on the other side of the railroad tracks. Do you know right off the hand what the address is there? I can't remember the. Yeah, just as you're going up the hill on the south side of the road. Yeah.
Was it a historical building, or was it just a converted rental type thing?
Yeah, no, it was actually a single-family home.
Okay.
It had been converted, though, originally to a rental for a while, I believe. This family took over, and it was actually a single-family home. And, you know, as you can imagine, beautiful woodwork in that home.
The money they put into it is.
Yeah, beautiful floors. You know, so they did a nice job of renovating it, unfortunately.
Was there any injuries, and were any other surroundings, like houses or anything affected, or?
No, we did not have any injuries, no. And what was the second question?
Were there any other surrounding structures affected?
No, we were able to stop it within that structure. Yeah, in fact, like I said, I think that they did a really good job of stopping it, but they were flowing a lot of water, number one, and they had to tear a lot of ceiling and from the inside, the walls and the ceiling, so I'm not sure what the insurance company is going to do if it's salvageable. We don't know that. They'll make that decision, but just because of the chase, they unfortunately had to do a lot of destruction within the building, so it didn't get away and actually put the building to the ground. So, any questions at all about the activity report or that? With that, the other item on the agenda has to do with our EMS program. And what I'd like to do is bring our EMS Division Chief, Jared Thompson, up. If you might recall that we hired him back a couple years ago. Actually, it's going to be a couple years in April here, back to our department. He left after getting his nursing degree, and he actually went into nursing for a period of time. I think he was gone from us for maybe 1.5 years or so, JT. I was sad to see him go, and I welcomed him with open arms when he was on his way back to our department. But to tell you the truth, I never ever imagined that we would be able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish in the last couple of years since he's been back to our department. He'll talk about a lot of the things that we've progressed in, but a lot of these things we started talking about when I came here 7 years ago, or almost 7 years ago, and we weren't able to get them done because there were such huge projects. Such things as our protocols and procedures, they needed to be restructured, rewritten, redeveloped, state-of-the-art. We wanted them state-of-the-art, and we had been talking about that particular project for years before Jared came back to us. QA and CQI, so quality assurance, continuous quality improvement. We started talking about that when I got here because we had no program, and it's actually state mandated, so we had to do something to actually do, and we did a small amount in order to obviously be compliant, but we're at a whole different level right now with our QA, CQI. I can talk about our training. He's a gifted teacher, mentor, coach. He not only is a teacher and mentor in the classroom, but he actually goes on calls with the people, with our firefighter medics, coaches them, talks them through difficult calls. If he thinks it's difficult, if he thinks the call is going to be difficult and he has the ability to be able to respond, he doesn't have any other responsibilities, he will actually go. And initially, I think there was some hesitation because you have a chief on scene with you on a regular basis. But I think the comfort level has gotten there. I think he's been responding now for about 6 months or 6 or 7 months on a more regular basis. And originally there was some question like, why are you here? But I think now everybody knows he's there to try to obviously advance their abilities and advance our abilities to our community. So that's a huge thing. Our documentation, he'll talk a lot about our documentation. We had a lot of growing pains with our documentation. It was less than stellar, and when our documentation is less than stellar, it makes us a little more liable, obviously. Litigation could come our way, first off, but also it affects our ability to gain revenue from Medicare, Medicaid, even private insurance companies. So our documentation, we started working on this, and I say we because I was a sporting role, I was the cheerleader, but we started working on this probably a little over a year ago, and he'll talk about the progress that we've made and the effect it's had on our revenue, our ability to gain revenue. And so with that equipment, we'll talk about the equipment and I thank the commission for that support. Obviously, I thank the city for the support in being able to get us the equipment we need to be actually provide services out to our community. It's just spectacular. And like I said, Division Chief Thompson will talk about that in more detail. He's got a PowerPoint presentation that he has that'll explain everything to you. And with that, I'm going to bring JT up and let him talk to you. I didn't mean to talk this long, actually.
Good morning. I appreciate this opportunity to kind of expand some of the progressiveness that we've made within the EMS focus of the fire department. When you really look at it, EMS is 80 to 90% of the job that we do. So we run many calls a day, and we have a lot of high acuity calls that poses a lot of stresses as well as challenges to our paramedics, and that's what I focused on since I took this role as the division chief. So I entitled this PowerPoint EMS Innovations. I don't know if you can see it on the screen here as well, but if we can advance to the next slide. So I'm going to do my best to try to read my PowerPoint from that area. But so one of the biggest and most excited, I wanted to start off first. My wife actually looked this over yesterday, and she goes, "Don't you want to save this to the last because it's the most exciting?" But I said, no, I want to start off with a bang. So it's entitled Advanced Cardiac Arrest Resuscitation, and it's a new thought process that has been developed and deployed by areas or departments throughout the United States. It's not widely known, but through our medical director, Dr. Judd, through Aspirus Hospital, we've been able to implement this cutting-edge technology and treatment modalities. And it has been shown to increase the chance of a return of spontaneous circulation, or ROSC is what we call it, from cardiac arrest in the field. So our citizens of Wausau are going to truly benefit from this. And when it's done right, and that's what we're going to be training on at the end of the month, we have 3 days that are scheduled to actually choreograph how we're going to deploy some of the tools that we have up there that we receive not only through funding through the city, but also through federal grants and a generous donation by 2 city residents by the first name of Carrie and Don. So we have the Zoll cardiac monitors, which were the Zolex series. Our last ones were at the end of their service life. The city was able to find funds to actually fund 4 brand new cardiac monitors, Zoll monitors. We just purchased the Zoll Auto Pulse, which is a new mechanical CPR device. The last device that we used was a Lucas device, where it used a a piston type approach for compressions. And this device actually does a circumferential squeeze. So it actually squeezes more blood out of the heart to the brain. And then we're also going to implement a couple other devices. It's called an impedance threshold device. And it's a little circular device. It's also called a rescue pod that we hook up to our endotracheal tubes. And it actually creates a negative pressure, so it draws blood from the brain back into the heart to allow more blood then to be circulated from the heart back to the brain. Because when we think about cardiac arrest, obviously we want to get a heartbeat back, but we also want to be able to perfuse the brain so that our residents, our patients, can have a meaningful life once they're discharged from the hospital. So there's been a number of departments throughout the United States. We're going to be the only ones in Wisconsin that are going to be rolling this process out. And it's kind of, we're delaying certain aspects that we thought were beneficial early on, such as the use of a medication called epinephrine, as well as we're going to be delaying a defibrillation as well, based off of it's end-tidal capnography, which is basically when we exhale carbon dioxide, and with our cardiac monitors, we can actually monitor how much carbon dioxide our patients are actually exhaling, and we can determine when the appropriate, here's my computer so I can actually see it better, so I'll just open this up while I'm talking here. Yeah. I'm supposed to have 20/20, but maybe that's not right.
Audio test today, telling me not to do that.
So it allows us to actually defibrillate the heart when the heart is ready to receive that electricity. There's been departments that have deployed, it's called a bundle of care, which we are going to deploy here shortly with the help of these departments in the United States, as well as Zoll, the Zoll company, who has backed this with clinical research as well, so that we're doing it right and we don't have mistakes, and we can learn from the mistakes from other departments that have implemented this before us. Another big aspect with the AutoPulse, which is the mechanical CPR device, is we have now two devices that communicate with each other, and it gives us a CPR feedback, so we know how well we're doing CPR. When we attach the AutoPulse, which we'll have pictures of here shortly what it looks like, and if you've watched our Facebook page, there's been some videos and pictures of that as well. It communicates with the Zoll monitor, and we can actually upload all that information into a cloud and pull that down into a data bank and actually see, okay, how well did we do on that cardiac arrest? How long, or what were the pauses of CPR? Why were the pauses of there? So that we're shooting for the amount of compressions that are done during the cardiac arrest reach 80 to 90%. Roughly right now we're at 50 to 60% because we actually have to pause the CPR device to assess the underlying rhythm. With this device, the AutoPulse, as well as our cardiac monitor, we have what's called as the Zoll CPR artifact filter. So we can actually see the CPR artifact as well as the underlying rhythm. So we do not have to pause CPR to assess the underlying rhythm. We can defibrillate, and that's what's shown to really save people is chest compressions, continuous chest compressions. So it's really I'm really excited to see what this does for the community and enhance our out-of-hospital cardiac arrests as well. So I thank the city for their generous funding with our cardiac monitors. Our last ones were put through the test, and they survived it. So we have state-of-the-art equipment. Any questions on this one? Okay. The next one is a video. I hope there's sound as well, because this is the model that we're going to base this off of. This is from the Rialto Fire Department in California. They're the individuals that actually spearheaded this, and their retired EMS chief, we were on a webinar with him the other day with our medical director, and he explained, and he's going to be part of this, rolling out of this technology and treatment modality. So hopefully it plays here. I think you just click on, oop.
Look like on the next page.
You said this is a different slide?
Yeah, this is a different slide.
Yeah, usually they either autoplay or you can.
Yeah, okay.
Is it related to this link?
That's a link to our YouTube page, but we can play that one. So this was just the approach that Rialto Fire from California is using and has used, and we're going to base our model off of. So it's going to be a very choreographed approach from our crews when they respond to cardiac arrest. And that allows early chest compressions, continuous chest compressions, and no delay as well. So this is the first time. It's actually called pit crew, and they base it off a pit crew approach, which they base it off of NASCAR. And when you ever see NASCAR or IndyCar pit crews, how choreographed their routine is, from changing tires to filling the vehicle with their fuel. And we're going to base ours off of, so when crews arrive on scene, they know exactly what they need to do, when to do it, so there's no delay or duplication of efforts whatsoever.
Jared, do you have the same crew most of the time? Are they same individuals per crew?
We do, but with this pit crew approach, it'll be where the individual's assigned. So
One,
the,
2, or 3.
the lead paramedic, the driver of the ambulance, the engine company that responds as well, the officer and the battalion chief will all know when they arrive on scene where they should be. So the lead paramedic does not have to spend so much time directing them. They just merge in to that call smoothly, which aids in the efforts in cardiac resuscitation. So this is actually the auto pulse. The gentleman in the middle was actually the clinical, and on the far right was Eric. He was one of the Zoll clinical specialists that came. This was also included in our purchase, free of charge, that actually introduced this to our crews and aided us in the training and understanding of the auto pulse. So you can see in some of those pictures, there's what's around my chest. I'm actually the one in the middle there. I was the dummy. Yeah. I haven't heard that one before, so don't feel bad.
Your crew will love that.
Yeah. So that's called the life band, and that's what performs the circumferential squeeze. So the clinical deployment specialist, Eric, the example he used was a sponge. If you fill a sponge with water and you take your finger and you press down on the sponge, yeah, you get a little bit of water out. But when you actually squeeze that sponge, you get a lot more water out. And that's the methodology behind the auto pulse with this life band, is what they call it. It actually squeezes and compresses the heart, which ejects more blood from the heart to the brain. And then with the use of a little rescue pod that we use once we actually place an endotracheal tube on the patient, actually then sucks blood back from the brain, the venous system, and returns it back to the heart. So this is what is preserving not only the heart, but the patient's brain as well, so they can have a quality of life once they return from the hospital. One of our, I don't want to call it neighboring, but it's Naperville Fire Department, has gone to this approach in Illinois, and they have increased their survival rate in the field by 50%. Just by implementing this bundle of care that we're going to be utilizing. So I'm very excited. if you want to play that link.
It got error, so.
Did it? Okay. So that was from our Facebook page. It actually showed the device in action. It's a lot less violent on the patient than from our previous mechanical CPR devices because it actually squeezes the chest versus compressing. So one side effect of CPR is fractured ribs.
I would think so.
Then the patient has to recover from. And this is more gentle, and it actually is a better piece of device than what we used before. So this was a completely change of our equipment in this area. Everyone has Lucas. So when our Facebook pages went out, we had departments calling us. We had individuals from other departments talking to other crew members. What do you think of it? I'm excited to see what this will do, and hopefully other area departments might pick up on this as well.
Jared, how much training how many hours of training per individual is?
So the initial training was a 2-hour hands-on. It was basically all hands-on. Eric he's a retired firefighter, paramedic. He came from a service that actually used these. So he knew all the issues that we might run into, how to correct those promptly. And it was an intense 2 hours. And then at the end of the month, we're going to be doing extensive training on that choreographed approach to start CPR, manual CPR early, and then getting them onto this device so we can have continuous compressions, as well as the use of that filter, that CPR filter that hooks up to our Zoll monitors, so we can assess the underlying rhythm while CPR is going. And no other device out there allows paramedics to do this, and we have that technology. So why don't we go ahead to the next slide. So here's actually some of our cardiac arrest survivors that we've had in the past. Before COVID, I usually try to visit these patients in the hospital, touch base with them. And these were just two, and then COVID hit, and we kind of suspended this. We called it a resuscitation celebration. And these were two individuals that survived because it was a very fast response, early CPR and defibrillation. Now that's only just a handful of our responses. Usually we're late, and what I mean by late is when a person suffers cardiac arrest, someone has to recognize that patient's in cardiac arrest, call 911, 911 dispatches us. Our response times are phenomenal, anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. So we're not late in our part, but by the time we get there, we're late in the resuscitation. And a lot of the initial cardiac rhythms or arrhythmias are very lethal and do not respond to treatments as well as we would like them to. But with this new Zoll bundle, or this bundle of care that we're going to be deploying, it has shown that regardless of the rhythm, asystole, ventricular fibrillation, they're seeing a increase of response to the medications and treatments that we deploy or that we utilize on these calls. So these are just two individuals that actually survived. We brought them back, and not only does it provide closure for the crew members, but also the patients themselves. So usually they never see the paramedics that respond. And this was a chance that it also helps the crew's mental health as well, to see that what we do actually works. And this gives a boost of morale when they're actually able to exchange hugs and handshakes. And I think their families appreciate it more than even the patient. So those are two of them. And there's been many more, but these were the actually ones where I've been able to get in contact with. We can move. So video laryngoscopy. This is one of the most dangerous procedures that we perform in the field. And we've implemented a new laryngoscope. It's called the AirTrack video laryngoscope. And thus far this year, from January 1st to 2021 to February 22nd, it's actually today because we had a successful innovation over the weekend. a patient that had a severe exacerbation of COPD. The crews actually administered an induction agent, used a paralyzing medication, and placed an endotracheal tube. And this is the most dangerous procedure that we do in the field, and one of the most looked at procedures in EMS to determine if it should stay in EMS or should it be removed, because there are cases out there that have shown detrimental effects by a misplaced tube. So with the AirTrack, it gives us video as well as we can record it, and I required our crew members to actually record the intubations, and we actually keep them in a secure file. So if there's ever an issue with tube placement confirmation, we can actually have that video and to show that it was actually placed correctly while the patient was in our care. Now, the national average, I've done a lot of studies or a lot of reading on studies and reports. The national average is anywhere from 70 to 80%, and it's based off of first pass success. That's when you actually put that device in the patient's mouth and attempt to place it in the trachea. So it's 70, 80%. So thus far this year we've had 9 intubations. 8 of those were successful on the first pass attempt, so we're sitting at 89% right now with first pass success with an endotracheal tube. And that really goes to show that we've done a lot of training. We've been, again, this was money that the city gave us to purchase a superior video laryngoscope for our crew members, and it has aided with success with intubation. And I'm very proud of our crew. We spent a lot of time inculcating a proper technique and as well as pre-oxygenating the patient during this procedure. So we don't cause more harm to the patient. And that's studies have shown that can happen sometimes when we use this technique with endotracheal intubation. Okay, we can move to the next one. I don't know if those videos are going to play at all. These were actually, okay, good. So why don't we play the middle one? Okay, so this was the intubation that was actually performed over the weekend. So what you see on the screen right now is one of the crew members is actually getting the AirTrack video laryngoscope prepped and ready. There's no patient breach. That would be the last thing I would do. So everything is getting positioned. Okay, now the blade is going into the mouth. It's advancing down the airway. There's some secretions that they have to kind of work their way through. And those white things right there are the vocal cords. And the tube is going to be coming down here shortly, right there in the upper right-hand portion. And it's being placed right through the vocal cords. So that would be a successful first pass intubation, and it's recorded. Now the far left one is actually one of the fastest ones that was done in our department. I won't say by who, but this was actually a trailer had fallen on this gentleman, and good visualization of the vocal cords. The tube was passed through, and I believe start to finish from that intubation it was 9 seconds, and intubations can take anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute. And this device is just phenomenal in how it actually contours to the anatomy of the airway with the patient. So, and if you want to play the last one, that was another successful intubation as well. This one was during CPR, which the last thing, some services actually pause CPR, which is the last thing we want to do to place an advanced airway. But with this device, we can actually continue CPR and place the tube. So there is a lot of, there's some emesis in there that usually we have to fight through. The crew members are using a suction device to suction out some of that, because we don't want to pass the tube through that and then put that emesis in there in their lungs, which could create an infection. And I apologize if this is maybe a little graphic, but, and pretty soon you'll see the vocal cords. There they are. And you can see compressions going because it's actually, they're placing, that's called a bougie. It's kind of an introducer, which allows then the tube to go over that as well. And there's 3 successful intubations that we've had this year so far. So for our attorneys that work for this city, you can be assured that we do a lot of training, so we'll keep our noses clean and they won't have to spend much time with us.
Do they do this procedure in the ERs?
In the ER, yes, they do, yep.
So you're almost better off getting picked up by our guys than you are to go to the ER because you get it done faster, right?
It's an early definitive airway, so once they get to the hospital, they don't have to do that procedure, and the patient can be placed on a ventilator right away. So, and that's the endotracheal tube. If we go back one slide. The tube is right in the middle, so that's actually the tube that goes into the trachea. And I talked about that impedance threshold device. That's what's going to attach to that tube and create that negative pressure. Okay, so we can advance those 2 slides. So that was, this was just a picture of myself training with the crews on this device. We trained in the back of the ambulance where sometimes this procedure is done. What's nice about that video, laryngoscope, is when we're training, we can Wi-Fi it to an iPad so the crews can actually see the intubation that their other crew member is performing as well. So it offers a lot of other great technology that we can use. Okay, so I also want to talk about ventilators. Again, with generous funding from the city, we were able to purchase another ventilator. So this is a full-fledged, basically ICU intensive care unit ventilator that we're going to be, so we have 3 that we're going to be placing on our ambulances. And this is really considered best practice and the gold standard for mechanical ventilations because, again, it takes out human error. When we use a device called a bag valve, it's up to the crew member to actually deliver the amount of volume of air and the rate. And again, studies have shown that because of human error, sometimes we overventilate the patient, which causes lung damage and tissue damage and sometimes irreversible damage, and that the patient has to deal with the rest of their life. So once the patient's intubated, we can place them on this ventilator and actually calculate the correct volume of air that goes in and the correct rate. So the patient's getting basically the gold standard of mechanical ventilation. Okay. All right, I'd like to move on to 12 leads. This is something that we're measuring and giving feedback to the crews. 92%, so this was last month, of the 131 EKGs that we did in the field, and all of those EKGs are transmitted to the hospital so the ER physician can actually assess them and activate the cath lab or get cardiology coming down to the emergency department for expert consultation. So we go through, I look at all the EKGs, I look at all 131 of these, and I throw away the ones that are irrelevant to what we're looking for. So for January, we had 92% of the EKGs were performed within or less than 10 minutes, which is a standard that the American Heart Association has developed for EMS and has been proven to improve patient outcomes who are suffering a heart attack. And this is just an example of an EKG that shows a heart attack. This was actually a patient, one of ours. I had blacked out all patient information on that. But the crews get on scene, they assess the patient, they get a 12 lead done within 10 minutes, and they transmit that to the hospital. And early activation of the cath lab allows them to get to the cath lab, and the cardiologists are able to open those vessels and restore blood flow. So this is something we're very proud of, because at times, before we actually started measuring this, we were down in the 70% rate of EKGs being done within 10 minutes. So a lot of training went into that as well. All right, so this was an award that we received from our EKG times. It was the Lifeline Mission Award. We received the Silver Plus, and the only reason why we did not receive the Gold is because we did not submit our data to the American Heart Association last year. This year, we will more than likely get the Silver Plus Award, but from the American Heart Association. And basically, this just gives recognition to EMS services that are doing their best to identify patients who are suffering a heart attack. This is some of our stroke care. So we are a part of a coalition with the state of Wisconsin. They actually send us report cards and do all the data pulling from our reports. And as you can see, the red column is Wausau Fire, and the blue is the rest of the EMS services averaged out throughout the state of Wisconsin. So you can see we have improved and surpassed what the average is for EMS services in a lot of areas. If you look at the one on the left column, last known well time is really important to the neurologist to determine when the patient was last known to be well, that did not show any signs or symptoms of a stroke, and that actually moves the course of their treatment down one way or the other. So that's really important. And then our on-scene times were less than 15 minutes. Obviously, there's lots of things we have to do on scene, and we continue to improve that, but we're still above the average EMS services within the state of Wisconsin. Okay, pediatric care. We were able to implement and roll out a pediatric hand-heavy medication dosing system. That picture is myself. That's back when I was a firefighter, paramedic, and the other gentleman in the middle is Dr. Antevi, the actual developer of this system, and that was our previous EMS Division Chief, Scott Hobick. And we had got a grant to roll out this system, and I was able to actually then deploy it within our department as one of the hand-heavy instructors. We were only there's only Wausau and Wisconsin Rapids in the state of Wisconsin that are using this system. But it really takes the stress and confusion out of pediatric dosing calculations. We have an app as well as a field guide that we can look up per age, and it determines the amount of medication and volume. So it takes all the stress and anxiety out of pediatric calls. So this is kind of a one that's near and dear to me because it shows that with the assistance of it, it works. We were able to actually resuscitate a 7-year-old pediatric patient. She was transported to Aspirus and then flown to Marshfield Children's Hospital. She had a congenital heart defect that ultimately took her life within a month and a half from our resuscitation. But the parents were actually able to, she basically got all the treatment that she possibly could from the specialists at Marshfield Hospital and their pediatric ICU. But it also allowed closure for our crew members that were on that call. And usually these are the most high stress incidents. And I asked the crew members, if you had the opportunity to look those parents in the eyes, could you tell them that you did everything you possibly could? And they said yes. And that helps with closure. And there's been a lot of articles out there in the EMS industry that shows that a lot of EMS providers cannot say that, and they carry that with them the rest of their lives. So I'm very proud of this system. And that's just, on the far right is an example of some of the medications. And it's not really the dose, but it's the volume of medication because everything is weight-based in pediatrics. So they can look at this information before they get to the emergency and know exactly what medication to give. Whereas before we had to wait on scene, actually take a tape out, measure them, and to know what weight and category they would be in. So immediate resuscitation can start occurring. So this was just some training that we had with the hand-heavy system, and with that grant, we also received their hand-heavy bag. So that is all dedicated to pediatrics right there. So when the crew members go into calls, that's what they take with them, and it's fully outfitted for pediatric patients. Okay. Another big area that we improved on was our Schedule II controlled substance policy. We implemented the NARC box, which there's a picture of it. So this is an integrated, fully electronic system that our crews utilize when they're administering or when they have administered or wasted any controlled substance, such as fentanyl and morphine that we carry. And this actually exceeds the DEA standard. We can be rest assured that if there was ever a discrepancy, it's been recorded and we can go back and find out the discrepancy, which there's never has been. This was a lot of bugs had to be worked out with this, and they actually developed a deployment algorithm based off of how many calls I gave them with issues that we were having with the box. But it's working wonderful now, and then at the end of the month we can reconcile all the medications, Schedule II medications that we give, and we have an electronic form that cannot lie to us. There's no altering it, so if we're ever have an audit by the DEA, it can be, we can pull the data from these boxes and give that to them versus paper handwritten charting of that. Compliance. Compliance is a huge area within the EMS. Since my arrival here, I've been able to become certified in a number of different compliance certification that has helped our department become compliant with a number of areas. And it can be very stressful. That's why I have that picture, because at times I was pulling my hair out of my head just trying to wrap my head around what we should be doing as an EMS service, especially when we're receiving money from Medicare and Medicaid, federal and state funded programs. So those are just a couple certifications: a coder, compliance officer, privacy officer, and documentation specialist. So the NAC is the National Academy of Ambulance Compliance. They're the gold standard that aid services into becoming compliant. So one thing with compliance is capturing valid signatures from a patient that we've treated and transported, and this allows our billing company, LifeQuest, to actually bill for our service and then to get reimbursement. Without a valid signature, we cannot collect revenue from or reimbursement from Medicare and Medicaid. And this is just a report summary. This last report summary, it shows 95%, but I examined all the runs that did not meet, the signature did not meet validity per Medicare and Medicaid's definition. And the two that were flagged, one, the patient refused, we can do nothing with that, and the other one was the patient was in law enforcement custody with their hands cuffed behind their back, so we could not gain a signature. So technically I view that report as 100% because those two other ones were out of our crew members' hands. So this was a huge amount of training, education, and even one-on-one training with individuals because there's so many different areas that they have to go over. We developed a signature Wausau Fire signature patient report pamphlet that allows the crew members to actually page through a number of different circumstances and actually find the one that applies to them so they know what boxes they're selecting and so on. Am I running overtime here? Okay, so we're almost done here. So the GY modifier, this is a modifier that is placed on our runs by our billing agency. So in 2019, our GY modifier, basically Our billing company places this on runs or claims and tells Medicare and Medicaid not to pay us for these because they did not meet medical necessity. And a lot of this can just be improved through documentation. So in 2019, we were 4.35%, and for 2020, we dropped that down to 2.28%, and the average is 3%. So we were able to collect on claims submitted. Our CQI, our QA, or in QI, CQI, these are all the different number of areas. If we move to the next slide here. We QA cardiac arrest, intubations, no transports, overdoses, pediatrics, respiratory distress, heart attacks, strokes, tactical EMS calls, trauma, and any other areas. So we've really increased our CQA and CQI program at Wausau Fire. And that's it.
Thank you for all the excellent information there. Any questions from the commission? Just one question. This level of sophistication relative to the service that we provide, is that a positive or a negative relative to being able to recruit people into the department?
I'd say it's definitely a positive. It really helps draw firefighter paramedics, especially new firefighter paramedics, that we're using state-of-the-art equipment. And the equipment that we have is new. It's serviced regularly through warranties and preventative maintenance. And we're doing procedures and treatment modalities that other services aren't, so they can know that they're part of an agency that is cutting edge.
And how do we get that information to people that are interested or applying for jobs like this?
We've done that on Facebook. Our Deputy Chief Bartek has placed that on Facebook. He emphasized the use of our video laryngoscopes. He in-depth put out the auto pulse technology, different trainings that we've had. So Facebook is one of the main media channels that we utilize to get this information out.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I'd just like to just comment on that really quick, too, is that you can just see the excitability within our department, advancing our department, and these guys being able to do all these things in the field that maybe they weren't able to do as effectively or efficiently before. Like Jared alluded to, it's a great feeling to be able to go out and do that every single day and be provided with the right kind of training, because there's confidence there, being able to respond with your EMS division chief, having the right type of equipment, and knowing you're going to come back and be able to document that and be able to do that very, very well to the best of your ability. So there's been a whole culture change in the last year or two within our department with all these advances. So I would agree with JT. People are looking to come to departments that are very advanced in these types of things.
Thank you both again. All right, with that, our next meeting is scheduled for March 22nd, 2021. Any agenda items that anybody would like to see on the agenda? Looks like we'll be hopefully doing fire chief stuff, so it'll be full. All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.